Crash Course Live is presented by
Smash It Demolition Derby, who host Bash for Cash, Blizzard Bash, and Capital City Carnage. Online at SmashItDerby.com. And Stirring Dirt Racing, hosts of Maymania's team show at the Golden Spike Arena in Ogden, Utah. Online at StirringDirtRacing.com.
Reckless Abandon Derby Apparel and Derby Inc. Magazine. This is the Crash Course Demolition Derby podcast, recorded live at the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York. And now your host, Chris Marquardt.
Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this edition of the Crash Course Demolition Derby podcast. Brian is off at freshman orientation, so fill in the high school jokes and the graduation jokes as you will. He's not going to be with us here this evening, but I know he's going to be looking forward to getting back here again when everything gets back into full run next week. We won't be on Monday because of Labor Day, and then Tuesday we're going to be just about back to school full time and everything up here. Hopefully everybody had a good weekend. It was good to see Bill Orndorff parked his car in Victory Lane down in Virginia over the weekend. That was fun to see. I saw Bo Lockwood picked up a win as well down there in Pennsylvania. Got the Gremlins worked out of the round back, it would appear. And then also some other odds and ends. The driver got burned down there at that Derby in Virginia. Hopefully he's going to be okay. And tonight, I believe, is Corey Rader's return to Demolition Derby action. He's been gone for 10 years. Got a compact put back together. He's ready to go over there at the Shenandoah County Fairgrounds in Woodstock. So that's fun to see him being back in the car. Hopefully he can find some good luck. We are here live at the FingerLakes1.com studios, and we've put our attention on some of the bumper science. We always joke and talk about how there's so many backyard engineers, and that we essentially could have a bunch of MIT doctorates if we could just get the MIT people to understand what was being talked about in so many backyards and garages around the country in the middle of the Derby season, and the way that all these different builders are able to get cars to do what they want them to do. And there's always all of the argument about what the right way is to do things, and depending where you are, changes the interpretation to that. And one of those arguments always come back to bumpers. Does a flat bumper run better on a particular car? Is a pointed bumper the better one to run on the car? And that's where Darrin Brown, who's joining us on the line, can jump in here. And he put together a whole bunch of science and wrote a paper of sorts on it and posted it up on DFC Fabrication and sort of gave an authoritative look at it. Certainly there was some pushback and stuff. Jeffy Schoeman from Jeffy's Fab Farm. Every time I have a conversation with him, I get a little bit smarter and also lose some time off my life because I just put so much energy into trying to comprehend what he's saying. I end up dying a little bit inside. But he's going to be joining us here as well to be talking about that stuff. So I'm going to turn first the floor over to Darrin Brown. He's on his way home from work, had some derbies this weekend. Jared was in a full weld car. The plate's been very busy for Darrin and the Browns up there. But first and foremost, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris. We're excited to be back on. I know it's been a while, so yeah, I guess I'll just start off with DFC. It was kind of my baby. I started back in 2016, and I started building parts for people. And last year, I was building a cradle and I broke my sternum, so I was going to sell the parts to someone, but we ended up releasing all of them for free. So, all the parts I was building and some more, we just, we gave the files away pretty much so anyone could have them. So, from there, started getting a lot more questions about, well, which bumper should I pick? What's going to be right for me? And instead of answering, everyone's questions, it was a little bit easier for me to write the post. So, you want me just to kind of go into it from there? Do you got any questions?
Well, I guess first off, what exactly did? Go ahead and dive into that part first. You can find the post in its entirety. We're gonna put that into the chat here so everybody can have a look at that and find access to it so they can read up on it. Jeffy had his eyes on it earlier today, so let's start off with where things are at with the what drove the catalyst, what got us to this point to have you go through and write all that, not just for the questions and answers, but the science that went behind it.
So, and I've known Chris long enough when we worked on the magazine, and Chris has told me, is that all you ever talk about is demo? And it really is. That, demo guys, that's what we do. That's all we really care about. So obviously when I started building parts, I wanted to build the best thing I could. It wasn't to undercut another seller or something, It was just I wanted to do it and I wanted to have fun with it. So the things that I really started to look into were it's kind of bumper design, and the two things that go in that are the shape of the bumper, and then, I guess it's the 76 is more rounded, the 74 has got a little point, the pointy's got a bigger point, and then also the taper on the front of the bumper. So those were the two things that I was really concerned about, because I noticed at, say, Blizzard Bash, a lot of the flat bumper cars, they would dump in the spring pocket, and it would, the rails would drop, and, their bumper would be 10 inches off the ground in the front. And I wanted to see what I could do to try to alleviate that. So in terms of taper, I started to notice the trend with flat bumpers that something was going wrong, and it's really kind of the science behind it is that, a Crown Vic or an old Iron GM or a Caddy, they got a huge hole in the bottom of the spring to run in, where an 03 doesn't have quite that issue. So that bumper, you have, 200-300 pounds of these aftermarket bumpers that all that weight's hanging off the end of it there. So it creates a weak point, and especially if you're hitting something lower and you're hitting with the bottom of the bumper, it'll want to pull the rails down in the front. So what I started doing, and now all the bumpers that I have all have a taper on them. So the science behind that is that it prevents the rails from dropping, because your contact point is always at the top, where you would rather have your frame rails, kind of roll up, or, the front end of the car come up, because it's a lot easier to pull it down than it is to try to fix a really messy spring pocket.
Right.
So we started, looking into that and kind of, what angles are better, what angles are worse. And I'm trying to remember the angle on mine. It's like 1 inch over 4 inches tall on all my bumpers that, really, it's if you hit with the bottom of the bumper, you're kind of going to jump over whatever you're hitting. So say, you're hitting the back of a round back or something and you got a taper on it, it's less likely to be, a real solid stop. It's more likely that you're going to jump over kind of what you're hitting. And if you're hitting, say, a door bar, or, you're trying to clip a tire or something, hopefully what you're hitting with is the top of the bumper to prevent that issue.
Right.
So then we started to look into the shapes of bumpers, which, it seems like every bumper manufacturer kind of uses, the shape of an OEM bumper. So say a 76 Impala, a 74 Impala, whatever that is. So we've kind of stuck with that just because it's familiar and people know them and it's what it's like. But the post I wrote was about how flat bumpers are really pretty bad.
Right.
And in the old Wii Crash days, it was always, the more leverage you can take off the front of the car, the better. And that's still true to an extent. But with the flat bumper, it gives you a zero margin of error for trying to hit. So say you're a real reckless driver and, you're going to go and hit whatever's in your way. There's not going to be any real rhyme or reason for the reason you're driving. You're just going out there to stand on it. You actually probably want more of a pointy bumper. It'll wreck the car faster, but it gives you a lot more margin of error in terms of, where you're hitting. So with a flat bumper, you got to hit dead on, right where you want to hit in the center of the car to make sure that both of your frame rails are getting the same impact. Where a pointy, you can have up to, I think it's 18% or 18 degrees, something like that you can be off hitting something and you're still hitting with the center of the bumper. So the way I always try to explain it to people is, take a piece of paper and roll it up into a rectangle and just hit one side of it, the long way, and it'll kind of wreck the one side of the paper and it'll crumple, where if you hit it, straight on, it's a lot harder to compress it. And that's the same thing with bumpers and your frame rails. If you're hitting with one side, you're just going to destroy that frame rail. We've seen that time and time again where
Sure.
if you're hitting with the center, you're loading everything together, so it keeps it all, straighter, longer.
Well, I liked the debate about the flat bumpers because you hit on a lot of stuff about how you have zero margin for error. If you're not hitting with the center, then all the forces are going to be distributed one side or another, and that's where you start running into trouble. You're talking about dumping at the pockets, and you can use the examples of Blizzard Bash, but even something like a stock show, some sort of 80s and newer stock show, you're still going to see that same thing, and it comes down to having to be so precise. And Jeffy, I feel like once you got your eyes on this thing, you enjoyed the read, you enjoyed some of the content. I'm sure that your brain started spinning about placement of plates and placement of the way that you can run bumper shocks and different tricks and insides and outsides and tops and stuff. So just kind of with that little bit of an introduction, Jeffy, I mean, from your engineering mind and all of our conversations that we've had, what's some of your immediate thoughts on this stuff?
Well, the keys to this are the keys to success, and what works for me might not work for Darrin, might not work for a Patrick Dellis or a Pete Hansen. So it is a dangerous game you play to put your stamp on it and say this is what you need to run. It depends on how heavy your right foot is. It depends on your build. It depends on your fabrication skills. It depends on the general terms in Darrin's put your stamp on it and say
article
this is what you need to run are totally spot on about the margin of error and how you hit, and that's all by the wheel, by the foot, by the brake pedal, by the gas pedal, the conditions in the ring. And there's so many millions of variables that could change all that driving style is key with building style, with fabrication capabilities, and so on and so forth. So there is no right or wrong answer. The thing that is undeniable is physics is absolute, geometry is absolute. So each scenario has their pros and cons, but a flat bumper is a flat surface, and anytime you add any angle, anytime you triangulate anything, whether it's 1 degree, 5 degrees, 20 degrees, it absolutely makes it stronger.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's taking angle out of a frame as far as a box or pitching or twisting or pulling, changing that from 30 degrees in a box to 28 degrees is an advantage over your neighbor not doing anything. And that comes into play when you're mounting the bumper, what bumper you're using, and all of that. And yeah, of course, when I was reading it, I was like, well, I would do this instead of that if I ran this bumper, and if I ran that bumper, and if my choices were this, and depends on the car. And of course, there's 17 million scenarios going through my head, but the little finite notes about the angle and the difference, I eat that shit up. I think it's great.
Right.
So
how much, like, Darrin, were you watching videos besides being in person at a bunch of these shows where the heavy cars are built and having the chance to work on them in terms of the fab company and getting your bumpers out there on cars at Blizzard Bash and things like that, did you watch video to get a deeper cross section? Was it just isolated to Blizzard Bash and shows that you're at in person? Where did obviously it'd be tough to have some sort of definitive authority on just cars that you ran because you're one person. You have your preferences, just like Jeffy was saying. You're in a great area, though, because you've got the ability up and down the corridor from where you live all the way down to Topeka to see all sorts of different driving styles and named drivers driving different cars with different frame situations and different rule sets and different bumper combinations that everybody can sort of look back on and say, yeah, I can kind of agree with this here. I disagree with this there. What kind of research went into it?
Well, I guess I consider myself a student of the game. I wanted to jump back with Jeffy, though, is I didn't want anything I wrote to be like a definitive run a pointy on your car, because I don't think that's ever the answer.
No.
Because, and I'm sure you guys know as well as I do that Bob Whitaker, Don Santel, those guys can go into any track wherever with any car built by someone else, and they're probably going to be in the top 3, They're that good, So my research mostly came from, I go to shows everywhere kind of in like a 5-state area. I try to hit as many as I can. I watch videos as much as I can. And, I've worked on cars. I'm always willing to kind of jump in and help, at any show that anyone ever asked me to. If, the heat went bad and they got shit wrong, we're going to jump in to try to help fix it if we can. So, it's just a lot of studying, and you look at pictures and videos, you talk to people. It's mostly just trying to figure out what went wrong, where it went wrong. And the hard part is that we would love for it to be a perfect world, and that's parts builders, drivers. It does, we want everything to be a perfect world scenario, but this sport, there's nothing perfect about it. You can plan how a heat's going to go in your head for 2 weeks, and as soon as the flag drops, it's all different. So but the way that we can try to get better as, a builder is we can't account for, something that we don't know is going to happen. So we try to build to a real world scenario and hope that builds a better car for us.
I got sidetracked here. There was a lot of stuff going on in the chat. People talking about their favorite bumpers. A lot of discussion about the '76 Impala bumper, and then also a lot of discussion about the G-body bumpers, which is a different animal altogether. Jeffy, in your experience, have you ever come across anybody that at the end of the Derby was truly happy? Because, I mean, you kind of listen to what Darrin said, and something always find out what went wrong and where it went wrong. You get back over analyzing a Derby car, whether it was a winner or whether it was a loser, you still want to find stuff to fix, to make better, so that it doesn't go as fast, so that it doesn't bend as easy. And at the end of the day, you might have that check cash, but you're still trying to do better.
Oh, every single car. Try and prevent every scenario before it happens. But seat time, watching cars, watching other drivers, looking around at other builds, learning what not to do is just as important as learning what to do. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people over the years have given me excellent advice when they see something on my car, and I try to pass it on as long as they can. And a lot of what happens recently, as things get bigger and bigger for my shop, I'm sure Darrin's been through it for years, is you'll get that phone call and go, "This has never happened before." And you go, what did you, well, I bought this pointy. I've never had a pointy before. Okay, well, you always ran stock bumpers, so now you have this immovable object, so now it has to go somewhere else, and they weren't prepared for that. Mm-hmm. Over bumpering a car, under engineering other stuff is sometimes, bigger, nastier, heavier, thicker is okay as long as you have. It's all about the whole package. So you got to stand back and look at the whole package, the whole car. What is the car capable of? And especially with the backed off builds that we're running across now, the pro stocks, the motor swap classes, the bone stock classes, I'm a firm believer in that most of the demise of most of the guys out there is they're over bumpering the car. That's just my opinion. I run differently. I'll drive differently depending on the scenario. Mm-hmm. But when you have these heavy killer rules that we've been running for years and years and years, and you back them up, I totally get the guys that want to buy bumper after bumper after bumper. But when you back up the build of the car, you have to back the package up completely from bumper to bumper. And I think sometimes that's what gets lost.
Well, I think that over bumpering thing is a conversation that's happening more and more. You see some of these bumpers are being mounted with forklifts, and you can't exactly do that. And the conversation continues to kind of come up about this bumper is going to be too much for the front of this. The Luminas, the compact guys, they talk about what bumpers those combinations can handle, the Camrys, what bumpers those combinations can handle, and what they can't. But I think also a lot of it comes back to what's behind the bumper as well. something you just said a minute ago was talking about the point. The point is never the answer. So I'd like to explore that a little bit more too. I mean, and Darrin was pretty quick to follow up with you. I want to get into Darrin a little bit, talking about those angles and factoring in stock bumpers versus welded frames and stuff behind it. But first, I want to dive into that point discussion first, because it seemed like the point had the biggest margin for error, but the point's never the way to go. What were you saying there?
Well, I guess for me, it's not that the point isn't always the way to go. Mm-hmm. So it depends on the rule set for me. It's right. So whether it's Blizzard Bash, I can't imagine I would put any other bumper on like the national Blizzard Bash cars than a pointy, because you're giving up a lot of damage that you can do, and popping beads on tires, getting further in, and especially there with the way that wagons have kind of taken over now, and it's more of a steering clear show. You kind of want as much out on the front as you can to try to keep it away from your steering. But it really does depend on a rule set, and it depends on the driver style too. So like for me, if I look at, say, Don Santel, Bobby Whitaker, Daryl Monroe, all those guys are good enough drivers that they don't need a pointy, because they can drive, and they're going to put their car right where they want it every single time. Where a younger kid, or maybe someone that's just getting into it and they're just there to have fun, and they're going to put their foot to the floor, they're not going to care what part of the car they're hitting with, they just want to hit stuff. Point might help them in that case, because they're not going to offload everything onto one side. Mm-hmm. But what Jeffy talked about was really good about over bumpering cars, because it's true. I have weights on all mine, and I think the half-inch thickness pointies weigh right in at like 350 pounds. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot for a car that doesn't have any seam welding, and it's a lot of weight just to hold, just the welds to hold that on, let alone the rest of the frame, what that's going to do. So, and that's kind of where I started in 2017 when I sent the team to Blizzard Bash. I brought up the crush bumpers, which was basically it had an artificial skin on the front of it that allowed movement on the front of the bumper. So you still had like a backing, so to speak, that was super solid, but there was 2 inches of gap between, kind of this artificial skin and where that backing started, to allow for it to, absorb some of the impact. Because, the harder the cars get and the more areas you eliminate, it's the next spot the car is going to bend. Right. So we've had silly stuff happen where cars bend where you couldn't have guessed they were going to bend there. I've helped. I have a friend that he runs mods around here, and we literally had it's a mod car, and it's an 03, and the top of the frame behind the A-arms bent in a way that I've never seen before on a car. So it's always constantly learning, constantly trying to do better, but there's also part of it that we're in a sport where cars bend, and it's got to bend somewhere eventually. So,
yeah, the energy has to go somewhere. Energy can't be erased; it has to be transformed. So, make it do what you want to do, not what you don't want it to.
Correct.
The smush bumpers that you were talking about, those were the ones that had the essentially the honeycomb inside the bumper, with a big gap, and as it pushed back, it would gain you a little bit of rise on the top of the bumper as everybody started to move through the course of the show, and noses started to shift up. As that smushed back, it gave you that little bit of rise in the front, offered an extra inch or two of protection by the time you were done.
Yeah, I mean, most of it was kind of like a hollow shell on the front of the bumper that it just allowed a little bit. So this was at Blizzard Bash in the limited weld, so you don't get the cradle and the tranny braces tied in quite like the national show. Right. So the cars are a little bit softer, and you get a little bit less bracket. So what we were trying to do was prolong the front of the cars as long as we could. And with a really hard bumper, that energy has to start getting transferred somewhere sooner. Where I figured that if we allowed room for the bumper to crush on the front where really it doesn't matter as much, because the rails are still going to stay the same distance apart. The bumper's not going to fold in on itself. It just basically allowed a little bit extra cushion to get us through the heats without the frames taking any energy, and that was the whole goal behind it.
It'd be interesting to see how those margins of error changed and fluctuated when you start factoring in the sway of the front rails on the front, and how fast a car would shift and move. You see those hits that are put on the edges of the bumpers trying to get the front end to sway and shift, just like you see it on the back, trying to get that to get the bend to be a little bit more unpredictable so that you can open up steering components, open up rear wheels, and move the sheet metal and stuff. You get that sway to move. Now your rails underneath your feet are straight, but up front, that's shifted. And then the car that you're hitting may potentially have shifted as well. It'd be interesting to see how those percentages and how those angles changed and what that did in terms of some of that study that you put together.
Yeah, and I have a little bit of documentation on it. So when I was in college, I got free stress analysis software, which is really good for demo guys. You get to learn a lot. And so the further a bumper sticks out, say like a pointy, the more likely it is that someone can catch, say the point of the bumper to get those rails to start to sway. Obviously the worst is going to come in, someone's going to clip the side of the bumper, and that can start to move it. But from what I've found, really the difference between a 74 to a 76 to a pointy, in terms of how much that's going to allow to sway, isn't very much at all. And if anything, it's more likely to... I found that the damage from hitting off-centered, not with the center of a bumper, but hitting with, one rail instead of the other is way more damaging than it is the sway. But I grew up, we built Chryslers, shockers and stuff, and, I'm sure a lot of the guys that have built shockers before know the issue with the sway on, a Y-frame or a shocker or anything. So it's something we took into consideration and I've looked at. It's just that I found the difference between the bumpers hasn't been as much as some of the other factors.
Gotcha. I really like the idea of, you were talking about those drivers. You ran through a whole list of them, and you look at some drivers also that spend most of their time in the stock shows who choose to run the flat bumper just because the theory is always that the flat bumper is going to divide everything out evenly. And like you had written, so long as you're hitting center with it, it will divide it. But otherwise, things are going to start to sway. But it's fun to watch those drivers when they don't have the ability to put the pointed bumper on it, how they can use the corners of the bumper and their steering and their car control to do the same job as the point. They just do it at a steeper angle and more subtly without that crazy half-track shot in the front wheels.
Yep.
Jeffy used to drive like that back in the day.
I think I've driven every style, every way, with every combination, depending on what the world gives me.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, when this content stuff, it all came out initially, Darrin, what was the feedback that you were getting? I mean, obviously we're not out here to say that definitively this is the hard and fast way to do it. This is the only bumper that you need to run. This is whatever. It's just showing a little bit of math saying that, all the folks that are saying that the flat bumper isn't the way to go, that a pointed bumper, it's just got a better margin for error. It's not any type of definitive be-all, end-all, but there is some, the science is undeniable. The geometry doesn't change. It's a truth regardless of how much welding wire you put behind it. What was the feedback that you got?
So really, from what I saw, it was all pretty positive. I think a lot of the guys that I deal with, or a lot of the newer people that come in, they're newer to the sport, they're trying to learn, and that's always kind of where my soft spot's been, is I've always been an open book. If anyone has a question, I might not have all the answers, but I'll give you my damnedest to give you what I think's the best thing.
Yep.
So, and that's where, I've written some other stuff too about tilting, I think, at one point, and I've done build guides on We Crash, and yes, the wee crash of old is still there, and people still see it every once in a while.
Right.
But I've always been an open book, so it's mostly been appreciative. And it's not that I don't want criticism. I haven't seen much of it, but, I always like dialogue, and I think that's what makes people smarter, is I can say, I've looked at it this way, I've done everything I could to prove my point, but if you have a differing point, that's okay. My answers aren't right or wrong. It's just that they're mine, and dialogue's good. Conversation's good. That's how you get smarter, is by talking to people and arguing a point, or just trying to, figure out a solution to a problem, and maybe it takes a few people to get there, but eventually you'll get there.
Jeffy, you're a dialogue guy. I'll let you jump in on this one.
Well, I learn every day. There is something that comes up that I didn't know about 12 hours ago, and I think the biggest thing is what Darrin said about you kind of thrive, you get a rush when somebody wants to, is asking for you to instill knowledge in them. And the biggest thing is, and I do the same thing, I don't know everything, but this is what I've experienced, whether it's engine tuning, transmission work, chassis, bumper installation, bumper building, welding, whatever. This is what works for me. This is what I've ran across. This is what's bit me in the butt. If I saw this on your car, I wouldn't recommend it. This is what I would do. But what I say isn't gospel. So the biggest thing is just being aware. And I think if somebody, came on a post, or if somebody was on Facebook or a chat and says, this is absolutely the bumper to run, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, the only thing I could ask them is what's your reasoning? Tell me your side of the story, and you'll find it's a very narrow window of experience. So as competition grows, as the seat time grows, as the experiences grow, whether it's wins or losses, some of the most badass guys out there, I know they intimidate the hell out of a lot of people, but from my experience, most of the most badass guys out there are also the most humble.
Right.
They're the most that are if you get them in the right scenario, and you're not in a public forum where things are uncomfortable. Most of these guys, you get them on a one-on-one, these guys will take you under their wing. They'll there's little tips and tricks and ways to twist things, and ways for you to look at things that you never looked at things before. And the biggest thing you can do is the worst thing you can do is slam your fist down and say, this is the way it's got to be, because the only person you're hurting is yourself. You need to be a sponge. You need to absorb everything that you can, physically or mentally, around all these experiences, around all these shows and all these different cars, because, well, Chris, in the motorsports world, we're doing something different every weekend.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter if I'm at the asphalt track, the dirt track, the derby, the drag racings. There is information that you can learn off of every sport out there that can help you. And it's all in how you interpret it.
We were talking on Final Round with a driver who was up in British Columbia that went to go to a drag strip in Idaho, or it was either Idaho or Montana. And they had used to live out here in New York, so they had some old notes in their computer from passes at Empire Dragway. And it turned out that even though they were so high above sea level, with the temperature combination and everything at home compared to when they were running in the States, they ended up going back to a tune that they had run in New York because of the way that the humidity, the water grains, and all this other stuff, and the track conditions.
Yeah.
So, and without that computer, they would have been completely out to lunch, because they wouldn't have ever really thought. The driver admitted this. This isn't my speculation. The driver told us this. The driver wouldn't have ever thought that the conditions in Montana for his car, based on the tune that he had in the car when he left home, would have been something that you would have run in combination with what you had when you were in Mount Morris, New York. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense that it would necessarily. But as things go and things change, you kind of run with the conditions around the track. Vince is Toast is in the chat. Del Savory is in the chat. He's talking with us a little bit. Frankie Guy's checking in as well. A lot of people agreeing with Jeffy, saying that it really has to come down to the build, and the track conditions can change so quickly as to what bumper's going to work or what bumper's not going to work. But I guess, at the same time, you want to be as precise as possible with your shots. I think everybody wants that. But that's no different than trying to hit your marks on a dirt track. You sail it off into the first turn. You got to make sure that you're a car and a half width up off the inside line so that you can hit the rubber. If you're above it or below it, it doesn't matter. Asphalt track, if you're 2 car widths up too high, you're in the marbles and you're going to stuff it in the fence. Drag racing, same way. You just got to make sure that you're precise with your decisions and you pay attention to your marks. There's so much head game that goes into Demolition Derby. We've talked about this as well, as the opening flurry might be crazy. But then you see that adrenaline dump. Everybody's so focused, they're dialed in, and then you see that adrenaline dump and things slow down. Then you catch a red flag or two. People have a chance to survey. They look around. They see this guy's steaming, this guy's broke, this guy's limping, this guy's out with a tire. So it comes back and the pace picks up a little bit more. Then it dies off again with that adrenaline drop. But just because it takes so much mental energy when you're trying to hit somebody with a 6,000-pound weapon that doesn't want to be hit by it. Let's see. Jonathan Heilman, 100th career feature win at Monroe County Fair in Woodsfield, Ohio. Chris Christner checking in. I didn't catch up with that. That's awesome. Good for him.
I saw that. That's
100th
pretty
career
cool.
feature win. That's no joke. We had a couple of people referencing, Darrin, some of the other pieces that you put together. You had something on bumper brackets as well.
Yeah. So, and that's more of it's a harder thing to answer, because the difference between running a bracket on the top versus the side versus the inside versus I've seen them inside the frame rail, it's harder to answer, but there's some science behind it too. Mm-hmm. And to talk about what Jeffy talked about, every single card, I think you have to look at the bracket a little bit differently. Frame thickness, internal gussets, whether it has a spring pocket or doesn't, all matters. So from the research I've done, say on like an 03, I would not run a bracket on the top. I would have a formed bracket on the side, tied into, if you can make a spring pocket or whatever. That's almost always going to be a better, for my eyes, it's always going to be a better thing to have that. It's going to give you a better outcome versus, say, a 79 to 97 Vic. I would run the bracket on the top, or a 98 to 02, I would run the bracket on the side. And that's all just the difference of the horn design, the brackets internally, and it depends on driving style too. But like I said, science, you can science it out as much as you want. There isn't ever an answer that is going to work for everyone. So you have to determine that yourself. I guess what I try to do is just lay out information that people can grab and go, okay, well, this is, I have this story about this is the frame I have, so I think that in my case it's going to be best to do it this way. Mm-hmm. And that's the best that, I can do. That's the best that Jeff can do is, if we're just trying to inform someone, we can't tell them a right or wrong answer, but we can try to lead them in a way that we think is going to be best for them.
I think mindset has more to do with it than what people think too, because if it's a bumper that makes you feel good, as cheesy as that sounds, it feel better because you've got a chrome versus a painted bumper. If you feel better because you got 2 extra passes on there, if you feel, you're gonna drive differently, and that mindset can be the difference between winning and losing. So it is about the bumper, but it may not be about the bumper. Sometimes guys get bit and go, oh, this thing's not going to bend, and at one hit the thing's pretzeled. That's the complete opposite of that. But having a conversation with somebody like Darrin, who's going to give you real facts and real statistics and give you his point of view and give you an opinion that is his, but it's as valid as he can give you, that can make somebody feel better about their choice, which is going to make them feel more confident behind the wheel in the car, and they can theoretically do better just because they're informed.
And I wanted to jump in right after Jeffy too, and I'm sure Jeffy's seen it too. Of one of the things I push, I get a lot of new kids that'll message me. The thing I tell them first is make sure your car runs good, make sure your drive line is bulletproof, and make sure you're comfortable in the car. Because I have seen so many kids drive out and they're not even comfortable. It's like you have to be comfortable in your driver's seat to do what you want to do. You have to be able to calm yourself down, and that's why I spend a lot of time building cages, and I run my cage different than most other people I've ever seen. Just the way that I want it set up in a way that you're comfortable, and that's one of those things that, and a lot of the new guys too, is they'll worry about what bumper they're putting on their car and what they're doing to the frame and how they're going to paint it and stuff, and they spend 30 minutes trying to figure out the wiring on the car, and they're always the first one out. If you have a drivetrain that you know is reliable and it's going to work, and this doesn't need to be a coiler or a red line. If you have a 350 from the junkyard that you've put some time into and you know it, you know how to tune it, everything there, that is so much more valuable, and you will do so much better in this sport. Like I said, half the shows you go to, if you can run longer than like 10 minutes, you're already going to do better than like 3/4 of the field, and all you need to do is have a really good drivetrain to do that.
100%.
That's true. If you could just wait out the flurry, just ride out the storm for the first 5-10 minutes, a lot of the issues that might be waiting for you, it'll just take care of itself.
Especially if you're running in New York.
Yes. Yep.
The first 2 minutes is like sink or swim.
That is a fact.
Been there,
Confidence is a big thing with what you were just talking about, and Christy Germain, she agrees completely there, saying that Devin loves his homemade bumpers all shined up as long as they have chrome on the front. So that was kind of funny to hear her saying that. Sometimes being a fly on the wall and listening to what drivers say is better than turning on the welder and letting it go crazy. That's from Dale Savory. That's a good point. Just kind of hanging around and soaking up what you can. Jace Holmberg checking in as well. The advantage to a pointy bumper is the leading edge is centered, say, when you're pounding a cage. With a flat, any degree of angle off the 90 degrees is going to put more stress on the leading rail. And Jeff is spot on in terms of other motorsports, things helping in derbies, especially when it comes to setting up engines and transmissions. We can dive into the engine and transmission talk, and we'll be here for a long time talking about how simple a carburetor is. No matter what a carburetor is attached to, its job is to mix air with fuel to generate power. That's the way that Jeffy explained it to me, and 45 minutes later, my brain was running out my ears because it sounded real simple, but then we started talking about all the different combinations of fuels and how you want it to run and timing and spark and ignition and pistons and compression and stroke and what the different things do to different elements. It was just awesome to have that conversation, and having spent so much time around modifieds, it helped me listen to things a little bit different for some of the cars going through the corners, but that's a different show for another time. The piece that you put out that we're talking about specifically in terms of the margin for error on bumpers, Darrin, it had a bunch of pictures with it. And you showed the bumper that was attached to it, and you showed different shock bumper shocks that were attached, and in different ways that the frame rail was going to move, and the way that the frame rails were straight. Did you weigh in different cars, or was it just strictly looking at the stuff ahead of the end of the frame rails in terms of the bumper angles and things like that?
So it's harder with software, because software doesn't take into consideration rust or, the exact shape of the spring pocket or the lip on a spring pocket and how that lip can actually strengthen the area a little bit.
Or where it was pinned.
Yeah. It can't take into consideration everything. So say a 9802, even down from that with VIX, a GM, they all have the same general frame shape. They're different. They're braced differently. There's differences in years of old iron GMs. There is, thick frame GMs. And every one of those situations requires a little bit difference, and it can give you a little bit of leniency too. The bracket on, say, a 71 Impala versus, thick frame 74 Buick 225, is different. That the shape of the frame is roughly the same. They look close to the same. If you didn't have a demo guy, they couldn't probably tell the difference, but they're different, and it matters.
Sure.
What we can do is, I can take into consideration a caddy and how a caddy has a hole in the top in front of the AR. On certain years, obviously. So every situation's different, but geometry's geometry, and every frame has bad geometry. On an 03, there's bad geometry right in front of the A-arm, and if you're going to cut a little pie slice out to bring the rails back down in front of there, every frame has disadvantages and advantages. So, is there a correct answer for every frame? No, but you can use, the general shape of something and go, okay, that is going to want to do this. There's a bend here and a bend here, and, anywhere there's a bend, it's kind of a weak point where it's going to want to move there. So it's more of how do I use, what I'm allowed per the rules to strengthen those areas and give me a better chance of having a harder car.
Sure. The angles, when you were running it through some of that data and everything, what is it showing you, if anything is different in terms of hitting head-to-head? You talked about hitting the soft parts of the bodies and catching the sheet metal of, say, like a round back and all that glorious pillar parking wonder. Going after wheels, tires, axles, trying to knock the steering out, catching a cage by mistake. What about when you see some of those just dead blow hits where two cars go nose to nose? Sometimes the points hit dead on, sometimes they hit offset. Does it still come back to that same idea of being cautious of where that leading rail is?
So every hit matters. And, say the hit where you're going to hit dead on nose to nose with someone, the energy is going to go somewhere. You want to try to square up the best you can. And that's when, whenever you drive, that's always your goal. Square up the best I can so what I'm hitting, I'm trying to hit square. So, that's always the thing is you always want to try to hit square. And where you're hitting, it doesn't necessarily matter in terms of a strength point, but there is parts where you might want to use the corner of your bumper and try to, say you have, your bumpers hanging out from your frame rail quite a ways. You might want to use that to try to, back in, try to hook some steering components or try to break a tire out end or try to open up the sheet metal a little bit and starting to weaken it. That's really, every part of your car can be used as a tool. You just have to make sure you're using it right.
Right on. Jeffy has told me that before we were at Bash for Cash, about making sure that you use all the weapons at your disposal on all four corners of the car.
And that is absolutely true.
So I mean, I love the bumper debate as always. I mean, it's fun to see what people are choosing for bumpers and what they want the bumpers to do. The big curved shape of the 76 Impala is always popular, and then the point of the 74, the deeper point of the Chrysler stuff. But I always got more excited looking at where the bumper shocks ended up being placed, whether it was inside the rail or on the outside of the rail. Sometimes they were inside the rail, and then there was a bracket mounted to the outside of the rail attaching the bumper because there was all sorts of different creativity going on. And sometimes officials didn't really know what to look for if they just thought the bracket was doing all the work. That was always fascinating to me. You're looking at the ways that it compresses, the way that it might even be crossing through the frame itself if you're real creative and live out in Dunkirk, and Hank Pensick knows what I'm talking about. That part of the stuff is really interesting to me too, beyond just what happens with the bumpers. And like you guys were saying before, the bumper's part of the equation, and then you got to move the step behind it. Then you got to pay attention and think about what this curve's going to do and what that curve's going to do, and trying to use those other pieces of the build to get the car to do what you want it to do. And all the same rules apply, not just in terms of weld cars versus stock cars, but also considering things like your comfort level. If you're not confident in what you're coming out in, then the rest is pretty much over with. Get Alex Vasco checking in the chat. Gage Sumner in 2015, when I built the first Amish pointy, I got made fun of for tapering the ends. And look where we are now.
I just wanted to jump in too, since Gage is watching. I feel like there's a lot of animosity in the part building stuff. I think Gage builds the nicest bumper out of anyone there. It is the gold standard. And everyone else too, Kelby with Circle Z, any of the other guys building bumpers or cradles or parts, you know, it's good to have variety. I think we're all trying to do a different thing. And everyone that builds parts, for the most part, does a good job. And I wanted to make note of that too, because I feel like there's some animosity there sometimes. But, you know, everyone that builds parts does a really good job too. And I just wanted to make sure that, you know, let everyone know that the guys that are out building in the garage, they're taking times away from their family too. I don't think anyone is out to make a killing on this sport. It's just, you know, I like to see that everyone's jumping in, and, you know, it's always good to see, you know, variety with parts and stuff. So,
speaking of variety, how tall was that stainless header for the compact that you shipped out the other day, Jeffy?
49 inches to Quebec. It's going out to Quebec. The one tallest before that, I think, was Sean McCollum's. I think he got like a 41 a couple years ago at White Pine. But yeah, we were literally talking in the shop, and we were gonna stitch weld it to keep it, you know, to keep the pipes from deforming. And I said, well, it's just gonna bend at the flange. You can't have that much mass sticking up unsupported, and a lot of the Quebec guys drive wide open too. That thing's gonna bend. It's gonna pull the studs out of the head. Something's gonna happen to it, but you know, to a degree, the customer gets what they want. So,
right on.
Yeah. So it's it's crazy what's going out the door.
It's whatever they want, it keeps you in business, I suppose, right?
What was that?
Whatever they want, if you can make it, it'll keep you in business.
Yeah, that's it. Within reason. I say no a lot. You know, the juice has to be worth the squeeze.
Right.
But yeah, sticks of pipe are 10 feet long. So let's, you know, sure, whatever.
At one point, I got asked to make a 2-inch cradle, and I turned that one down because I don't know a way that I could have even got that out of my vehicle. So
that's nuts.
Yeah. And there becomes a point of you know, your strongest piece of the puzzle, the piece next to it is your weakest link. So
right.
there just has to be some, you know, to somebody that's getting into it that may not have the seat time and may not have the experience. You could be talking to them or something, and you go, well, you want it to bend there, and they'll look at you funny, but I don't want it to bend. Well, no, it has to. Something has to give.
Yeah.
And if it's not any part of the car, it's your kidneys, it's your spleen, it's your, you know, it's your brain. It's only attached on so many shocks before you have a blackout. So, you know, you just know, you know, you don't want the car. I mean, some guys think they do. You don't want the car that lasts for 10 years. You don't want it to run forever. And, you know, it does need to have some gives. Me personally, I'd like to go through a few cars with some wins than have one car that does. I get tired of looking at cars. I get tired of fixing the same car. I get bored in that respect. I'd rather junk a bone stock minivan and run something else. And, you know, I've had nasty pro mod cars, but I got to cut mine up, and I'm just tired of looking at it. You know,
to keep those squishy parts from getting crushed inside, sometimes you just unhook the 5-point harness.
Yeah.
Let you slide around the car, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Squishy. That's for sure. I got, definitely got some bruises from New York the last time.
Jared had his 5-point come undone when he was running his mod car this weekend, right, Darrin?
Between getting thrown into the ditch from what we believe is a tornado, and then his belt came loose.
Crazy.
His belt came loose too. So he's got some bumps and bruises, but I'm sure he'll suck it up.
He sent me a picture of one of the bruises under his arm. It didn't look pleasant.
Every time he tries to run a harness, he ends up getting bruises on himself. I don't know why he keeps doing it, but
oh man. I can't believe how fast this show went. Well, guys, do you have any final thoughts on this? I know there's additional stuff coming. If anybody has questions, by all means, you can reach out to these two gentlemen. There's plenty of sources out there that are willing to help. Just kind of wanted to throw this stuff out there. I was really intrigued by the discussion with Darrin after we had talked a little bit about this piece that was posted on the DFC Demo Products page and just sort of where it went and the food for thought. So hopefully you guys took it that way, not with any type of definitive, this is the only way to build a Derby car. This isn't NASCAR, and we know that. But any final thoughts from you guys?
I'm in at the run, Chris, so I just wanted to say, if you're new to the sport, I see a lot of kids getting discouraged more recently. Keep trying, don't give up, and always try to be a student of the game. Always try to pay attention, and I wanted to say, get out there, try to support your local county fairs, and, try to, be nice to the next generation, because without them, the sport isn't going to be around forever, so. Do what you can to try to make sure that you're, you don't have to give them all the answers, but try to be nice, kind, and, hopefully we'll get this next generation on the right track. So,
Jeffy?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Kindness goes a long way. Sportsmanship goes a long way. And I think we're in a really good place right now. I don't think we've ever had an opportunity where so many promoters get along. Rules aren't, they're definitely not cookie cutter across the nation, but they're a lot closer than they ever were. And the sportsmanship from state to state and that we have going on with across North America is a lot more inviting than it used to be. So I'm very happy where the sport is right now.
For sure.
And I'm flattered to be part of it on a daily basis. So
I'm sure you've got some welding to do tonight, so I won't keep you. We got to run through a couple different high points and then recap what's going on with the Unified Point Series, and we'll call it good for the show, guys. I appreciate you coming on and hanging out for a little while. And,
thanks, man.
Of course, man. It's always good to have you on.
All right, talk to you.
We'll see you later.
Thanks, Chris. Nice talking to you, Jeffy.
Yep, you too, Darrin. Take care.
Yep.
There they
Bye.
go. Darrin Brown and Jeff Schoeman. Appreciate those guys tuning in. Had some Facebook messages here about some video game stuff. It was that was a good time. Bash for Cash. Jeez, can't believe I did that. Blizzard Bash coming up around the corner. That is going to be contested on the 11th through the 14th. National and qualifying team inspections are November 9th. Jump online, blizzardbash.com for details on that. We're running tight on time here. Look at this. It is getting later and later. Battle for Upperco. That's the demise at Upperco, October the 9th. Super stock, full size, dead stock, full size, stock compacts, dead man compacts, minivans, and mini SUVs, Power Wheels. Racing all part of the program there for Deadman online, deadmanderby.com. Pits open at 8. Spectator gates 11, racing at 1. Don't forget Burrito Live 2, October 29th through the 31st. 12,000 win super stocks, Graveyard Rumble, Joker Compact Rumble, all part of the program there at Burrito Live 2 in Cumberland, Maryland. Online, deadmanderby.com. Smash It Demolition Derbies, and their season is whittling right down. They've got the Blizzard Bash event coming up there to cap the season, but in terms of their Ohio program, Yoga County Fair, September 4th, that's coming up on Friday. Stark County Fair is the 5th and the 6th in Canton, Ohio. Highland County Fair in Hillsborough is on the 8th, and then they got a little bit of a break. September the 25th is the Ashland County Fair, and then the Brown County Fair in Georgetown on the 27th and 28th. Then just like that, we're going to be in October 15th and 16th is Fairfield County Fair in Lancaster, and then the Fall Cleanup Show is once again going to be in Washington Courthouse, Ohio at the Fayette County Fairgrounds on the 23rd. For all the details for the Ohio schedule and for Blizzard Bash, jump online, smashitderby.com. Jeffy's Fab Farm, we talked with Jeffy for a little bit tonight. Jeffy'sFabFarm.com, recognized as an industry leader in all manner of purpose-built demolition derby parts. Starting with rear ends in 06, Jeffy's Fab Farm expanded to headers in 2008, and the shop can boast a combined 70-plus years of mechanical skill. The Fab Farm specializes in LS conversions and conversion components with consistent feature wins across North America. Your turnkey solution is only a phone call away. The Camry Box campaign sets you up for success for a retail price of $525. If you need it, ask about the multi-fit shifter options. You'll also find fuel and air parts, suspension, transmission items, steering components, pedal switches, and gauges. If you need it, find it on the farm, jeffhughesfabfarm.com. Smith Metalworks, big player in the Hardcore series. We'll dive into that here in just a second. All-purpose fabrication shop that has taken the Northeast by storm. Chance has been winning like crazy this year. Smith Metalworks features more than 40 years of combined metalworking experience. The hallmark of the product line is the pointed and flat front bumpers, which, after you learn a little bit about the bumper geometries here in the post by DFC, you may be able to find what's going to fit best for you, for your rules, and for your build. The hallmark, again, replicates popular factory releases. They can be stuffed to run hollow. You can also find compact versions of those bumpers. Other items include Crown Vic door skins, battery boxes, mounting systems, pedal combos, and shifters. The shop offers all the odds and ends, such as distributor clamps and welded centers. Make sure you check out the GM floor liners, in-person locations for pickup in Mercer, Uniontown, and Bethlehem, and then shipping is available as well at smithmetalworks.info. Frankie Guy is waiting patiently for Friday to get here for Labor Day lockdown over in Stoneboro. That's the 4th and the 5th. September 7th and 8th is the Route 41 Rumble in West Alex, and then the final confrontation in Dunbar. September 25th and 26th, 15,000 win elite class, the 2,500 win hardcore full size sitting out there. The $3,500 Jeffy's Fab Farm Hellraiser Award is out there. 5,000 win hobby stocks, 4,000 win compacts, minivans, trucks, SUVs, youth full size, youth compacts, hobby stock, powder puff, all part of the program. Stay up to date online for the remaining 3 events on the Hardcore Tour, hardcorederbypromotions.com. The Unified Point Series, bring you up to speed on this one here is one of our final items for the night. Youth driver Mason Stacy drove 11 hours in a school bus toy hauler and picked up his 3rd win of the week in 2 different states. So that was pretty impressive. Mason Stacy picking up the win there. The Unified Point Series looking ahead to Derby Icons Metal Mayhem this weekend in Portland, Indiana, September 3rd through the 5th. And then Iron City Nationals down in New Alex, Pennsylvania. Steve Soyopa and the crew getting ready for that one, September 17th and 18th. October the 2nd is Triple D's Coshocton County Fair in Coshocton, Ohio. Spinning Wheels San Filippo Smash is a little over a month away on October the 7th in Morris, New York. Then Toast High Banks Beatdown in Salem, Indiana on October 8th and 9th. And the 16th is Rodney Man's Preble County Fair, Smash's Cleanup Show on the 23rd. And then Dead Man's Buried Alive 2 is going to be on the 29th through the 31st to round out the month of October. Steven Sickles, 156 points to his credit. Mason Stacy with that win jumps to second. Terry Abadi is just one third-place finish off of that pace with 66 points to his credit. TJ McCulloch is a win and a 3rd place away from catching up with Dan Roos, who now has 56 points there in 4th place. TJ, you can see him there. He's got 56 points. TJ there has 50 points. Amazing event so far. Jordan Rutherford, he could get into the top 3 if a couple guys don't score anything, and picks up points off 2 wins. Hypothetically speaking, Don Santel won the next 12 shows, and Steven Sickles never won again. Don Santel could win by 4 points, but I'm pretty confident that Sickles is all in on this one. Ricky Duggins, he's 1 win and a 2nd place away from the top 3, so there's still a lot of stuff to pick up. J.D. Loreen and Ken Kiskadden remaining in the top 10 as well. So this is certainly not over by any means. Mason Stacy winning there in Hart, Michigan. Let me get this back up for everybody. We'll do this, and we'll do this, then we'll wrap things up. Mini trucks and SUVs, Jordan Douglas won there. Bone stock full-size, Ricky Duggins got the win over Dan Roos. Full-size half-ton trucks, Jordan Douglas won there, and Frank Saunders took 2nd place. Minivans, Jacob Comstock won over Aaron Ross. And the Gut and Go mini cars, Mike Frey won over John McCall. Big car motor swap class, Mike Lipka won over Adam Edwards. There, that was at Hart, Michigan on the 28th. And that is that's everything. That's it. We covered it. Covered what we were going to cover anyway. There's other stuff that we didn't get to. Send me a message. We'll try to catch up as best we can. We've got rules packages coming together for Crash Course Nationals 3. Looking forward to that. Congratulations out to Jared Brown on that win. It was a very trying weekend for those guys. They're still working on promotions, trying to pick up a couple more shows. And those guys staying very, very busy out there in Minnesota. Had a chance to run that mod car, got back into the car, and got bounced around a little bit when the harness came apart, but he's got some bruises. He's still tuned in. I think that is going to cover it, though, for everything. Just looking close, making sure we didn't miss any messages anyplace. Yeah. So I think that's going to do it. Number 368 in the books. We appreciate everybody tuning in and hanging out with us for a little while. We're going to be back here again likely next Tuesday with respect to Labor Day. Thank you to everybody out there, and be safe. We'll see you next time.
The Crash Course Live is presented by Smash It Demolition Derby, who host Bash for Cash, Blizzard Bash, and Capital City Carnage. Online at smashitderby.com. And Stirring Dirt Racing, host of May Mania's team show at the Golden Spike Arena in Ogden, Utah. Online at stirringdirtracing.com. Reckless Abandon Derby Apparel, and Derby Inc. Magazine. This is the Crash Course Demolition Derby podcast, recorded live at the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York.